Sent me home, and I went back when I turned 17 and joined the Navy.
And in the Navy, what was the highest rank you obtained?
Second class petty officer.
And
that was during the Korean War.
Okay. So you served in both World War II and Korea then?
In Korea, yeah.
Now, were you drafted, or did you enlist in the Navy?
I enlisted.
And where were you living at the time?
In Springfield, Massachusetts.
So why did you pick the Navy as the branch of service?
I just felt like it. It's as good as any. And in boot camp, they send me to aviation school, you know, Sky. And I learned to be an ordnanceman. And at the same time, while I was in Norman, Oklahoma, they sent me to combat aircrew school. I was taking aviation ordnance and combat aircrew at the same time.
So what would your duties be as a ordnanceman? What would your duties be as a naval ordnanceman?
Take care of guns and bombs and all that sort of thing.
And as combat aircrew?
Anything that created disturbances.
And as a combat aircrewman, what would your responsibilities be?
Fire twin machine guns, defending the aircraft.
And you were eventually assigned to an aircraft? You were eventually assigned to a specific type of aircraft? I
was assigned, when I got to California, I was assigned as a combat air crewman, but we had 6 weeks of operational training, and that's training as a team, from the pilot to the ground crewman, you know. It's a team, and 6 weeks of training. And during the 6 weeks, they let us fire the machine guns and things like that, you know. But then, when we were 3 weeks into the training, they dropped the atom bomb. And a couple of days later, they dropped another one. A few days after that, the Japs surrendered. So we were supposed to go to Guam, and then from Guam, bomb Japan. Yeah.
So you were assigned to a bomber then? So it was a bomber, the aircraft that you were assigned to?
What was it? PB-4Y2.
Okay.
Privateer.
And that was a naval bomber?
Yeah.
And
it's a 4-engine bomber. It flew from land bases.
How many men were on the aircrew?
10.
And of those 10, how many machine guns defended it?
How many machine guns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 or 10 machine guns, yeah.
So how many different stations? You said that before you were a waist gunner?
What?
You said before that you were a waist gunner?
A waist gun?
A waist gunner? You had a turret in the middle of the aircraft?
No, they was a waist gunner in the airplane. I don't know, the way you're putting it, it sounded sounded different to me. But they assigned me to a plane, and the pilot said, "You'll be a waist gunner." And we had what we call a teardrop turret. And we were in the teardrop turret, which was in the waist of the plane, and we were supposed to fire, and the 50 caliber machine guns could go down like that, and we didn't need a turret underneath like the B-17.
So you had about 180 degrees of
yeah.
fire.
over 180.
Wow.
You know, if it went down, it would be about 190, 200 degrees all the way, and it would take care of planes down below us.
So did you feel pretty well protected?
Did
you feel pretty well protected?
Yeah. We had a song. You want me to sing it?
Please do.
Take down that blue star, mother, replace it with one made of gold. Your son is a combat air crewman. He'll die when he's 18 years old. And I was just short of 18 at the time.
Did the Navy lose a lot of aircraft?
The war ended in August, and my birthday was in October. So anyway, I managed to get out of that all right. Then we stayed in California for about a year and a half, 2 years, I guess, about 2 years, and acted as ground crew. Whenever they wanted us for flying, we'd fly, but most of the time, 95% of the time, was ground crew.
What kind of duties would you be performing as a ground crewman? Were you back to being an ordnanceman?
Yeah, parking the planes and doing all kinds of things that they do on the ground. When you're an air crewman, they count the time you spend in the plane flying. When you're ground crew, it's everything on the ground.
Did you get flight pay? Were you paid differently as an air crewman?
Yeah, I got flight pay. I had to fly 4 hours a month. And you just hitch a ride somewhere, you know. Say, where you going? You know, we got to go up and fly. These were, they didn't have combat air crewmen during the war, but they had to have crewmen. And after the war, it was easier, you know.
I can imagine.
And we'd hitch a ride and say, where are you going? They'd tell us, and we'd say, can I ride with you? I need flight time. And you'd fill out a little paper and sign that you had 4 hours of flight time, you know. The Navy took that and paid you. They paid 50% more than, if your pay was $100 a month, they paid $150.
That's a pretty big bump up.
It's a what?
That's a very sizable increase.
It's a very what?
That's a lot more money. Being
a bonus?
Yeah, it's a pretty big bonus.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get much then anyway. Got about $50 a month extra.
So in addition to being an ordnanceman, being a combat air crewman, did you go to any other schools or get any other kind of training? Yeah,
when I joined the Air National Guard, after I got out of the Korean War, I quit the Navy and joined the Air National Guard. And I got sent to Denver, Colorado on active duty and played electronic school. I couldn't remember the word. I hit my head 3 times on the sidewalk and the driveway, and I'm losing my memory.
So electronic warfare?
Huh?
Did you go to electronic warfare school? Or?
Went to electronic school.
Okay.
I learned to fix the radars.
Okay.
And by this time they had been further advanced, you know, than when I took them. When I took it, it was big. Could fill a room with the radar. And a few years later, just put them in airplanes and so forth, you know.
Did you work on any specific type of airplanes after the war in the Air National Guard?
After the war, I worked on planes as a crewman. a ground crewman.
So you must have seen the transition from piston engine planes to jets.
Yeah, in the Air National Guard, we had P-51s to begin with. That was Air Force, you know, and then we shifted, I forget the name, F-104 or something like that.
The Starfighter?
I think so. And we shifted to there, and that's when they decided to send us to electronic school.
Okay.
Because they needed guys with radar experience. And in the Air National Guard, they got to take what they have.
Right.
It's not like drafting, you know. So anyway, that's what we did. We worked on the radar sets and keep them going, you know.
So let's go back to your first days in service.
The first day in the service?
What was boot camp like?
Boot camp? Rough.
Where did you receive your initial training? Where did the Navy send you for boot camp?
It was Navy boot camp.
And where was that?
That was at Sampson, New York.
Okay.
And we'd go on like hell for 16 hours a day. And we started out with 120, and we graduated with 89. They were throwing guys out, you know, and here we were in the middle of a war, and they were throwing guys out of the Navy because they weren't qualified, you know, they weren't acting properly. And we were marching and going to school and all kinds of things, you know. And we had 3 meals a day. The first meal was about 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we'd have lunch and then supper. Just kept going. But they run you through this thing hoping you'll break out of the routine you're used to. And they just make you ridiculous, you know. And when we passed, we were happy as hell because we had passed, and now we had the men's and the Navy's, because we had to get along with all the guys too.
Right.
And if we didn't get along, they were throwing them out, you know. So we had to pass the Navy and the men's test, the men you're stationed with in the bunk, and we had barracks with 120 on the floor. So if we didn't get along good, if we argued or they fought with us or whatever, next thing I know, they'd call morning roll call out on the road, you know. And they'd say, Jones, you know, stay here when they leave, or words to that effect. And then they would send them home. You know, we'd get back and their bunk was empty and everything was, their lockers were emptied, and we'd get back at 4 or 5 o'clock and everything was gone. They would send them home, you know. They make it sound typically as if they're drafting all these guys and keeping them, but that wasn't the way it was. The way it was they were, you either live up to the rules or you get the hell out. So
do you remember any of your instructors?
I don't remember them. We had so many of them. everybody had it's like a daily schedule, you know, and they would change all the people around.
So did you have to learn any basic skills to be in the Navy?
Any what?
Any basic skills?
Basic skills? Like what?
Like ropes or any kind of equipment, any kind of specialized equipment?
Well, I was supposed to go to flying school, and I signed on the application. They were looking for volunteers to go to flying school to become pilots. And I put on there I graduated from the 12th grade in high school, and I didn't. I quit school after 11th grade because I had a French teacher who kept giving me E's, and I had 9 years of French in a French school. And anyway, when they found out that I had quit after 11th, because I sent them my enlistment papers, I finished 11th grade.
Right.
And on my applications, they made us sign applications for school to put us in the pre-flight training V5 program, and I was all set for that. I passed all the written tests. I passed everything, the physical. I was all set to go off when they found out I had quit school after 11th grade. And anyway, I didn't get any flight training. They called me down to the office, and the pilot, I still remember that, the lieutenant behind the desk said, you know, we find 11th grade in your enlistment papers and 12th grade in your V5 program. Which is it? I said, it's the 11th grade, but I passed all the written tests. He said, well, we're going to have to take you out of the program. So I said, Lieutenant, are you looking for scholars, or are you looking for pilots? And he said, if I get another word out of you, I'm going to sue you for insubordination. So I said, thank you, and took off. Then I finished the ground crew, air crew training, you know, and went off to California, where I was assigned to Fleet Air Wing 14. And that's, well, I forget the squadron number. We had a squadron too. You know, we were a squadron in Fleet Air Wing 14. And don't let people think just because you didn't see combat, you didn't see the war. Because we lost a couple of planes while I was there. Planes crashing and blowing up, and just like the one that's on CNN today. I was watching CNN, and they were talking about
They lost an F-15.
the plane that crashed. And
so what happened with the privateers?
Huh?
So what happened to the PB-4Ys?
Well, they were flying two planes, and the one up ahead blew up.
Just
and
like that?
Just blew up. And they don't know why. It went down into the ocean. It was flying over the Pacific. One time we were supposed to go to Hawaii and fly to Hawaii. We flew halfway and turned around and came back. Oh well, the sailors don't care.
So what was the range on the privateer? How far could it fly?
The range of the plane? Oh, I don't know, about 1,800, something like that. That wasn't my job, so I don't know that much about it.
So what would you do? What would be your typical responsibilities once the plane was in the air?
When the plane's in the air, man the turret, and you'd be just inside the turret, and if any plane showed up, any other planes, you had to climb into the turret and get ready to fire, charge the guns up, you know.
Now were the guns radar guided, or did you have to manually sight?
We had to do it manually.
Well, was there radar on the aircraft?
Huh?
Was there radar on the aircraft?
No. Not in World War II. We didn't have it. They had it in some planes, but not ours. There was just too much of it, you know.
So did you do the same thing in Korea?
No, in Korea I was in ground crew, and I was aviation ordnance. That was my rank, on third class aviation ordnanceman. And we'd load bombs and torpedoes. It was an experimental outfit.
Where were you based out of?
In Quonset Point, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And we flew in all kinds of planes, British bombers.
Really?
We adapt the torpedoes to the plane, you know, and find out how many torpedoes we could load in the plane and all that sort of thing.
So do you remember any of the specific types of aircraft?
Hmm?
Do you remember any of the specific types of aircraft that you attached ordnance to?
No, all kinds of aircraft. So just went in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. You know, we had British bombers and Air Force planes, all kinds of planes, to see what we could load for torpedoes and stuff. And by that time they got radar and all that stuff, but that was 51, 52.
Any other kinds of experiments?
Huh?
Were there any other experiments?
Experiments?
Yeah, different kinds of ordnance.
Different kinds, yeah. We'd get a Twix from the headquarters, and they'd say, we want to test so-and-so, and we'll have so many down there, and so many torpedoes, and if you don't have them, and all that stuff. And then they would pass it down a chain of command to some guy and say, here, this is your job, you know, and you'd do it. It's about all we had to do down there. It was busy. It kept you busy, really. And we had some French sailors come in on the aircraft carrier, French aircraft carrier. They came in, and we had a big long dock there. They parked next to the dock, and I can speak French. And the chief came in and said, anybody here can speak French? I said, I can. He said, come on with me. So we went outside, and this was during the Korean War. And he said, they want to know what the hell we're doing and how we're doing it and so forth. Can you explain it to them? I said, well, I'll try. So we did. And we had them all afternoon showing them different things we were doing and talking to French, you know. I learned French in French school, parochial school. It was Catholic school, you know. And we learned French, and we took courses in French. You know, in later years, 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade. Well, 10th grade I was in public school, and we didn't have French.
Right.
Anyway, I had French, and I could speak French. I could carry on a conversation in French, and the French teacher couldn't. she couldn't speak worth a damn. And all she knew was the words in the book, you know, the cat, the rat, you know, that kind of stuff. And I got sick and bored with her. And I used to get up and start talking in French. And explaining, she'd call me, ask me a question in English, and I'd answer her in French. So just when I got my report card for the whole year, she gave me an E, which was failing. And so I was going to have to take it over again. It was just crazy. And I went to the principal and I said, Mr. Cowing, I'd like to tell you what's going on here. And I told him, he was the high school principal, I told him what was going on. And he says, well, I can't do anything about it. I said, does she work for you? He said, yeah. I said, then you can do it. You can change the grade and make it an A. And I know more than she does about it. So he wouldn't do it. And I said, is that your final answer? He said, yeah. I said, goodbye. And I turned around and walked out. That was the last day of school.
Did you ever get your GED?
Huh?
Did you ever get your GED?
Yeah, I got it through the USAFI, United States Armed Force Institute, and I passed 5 tests. It was up in the 90s, and U.S. percentile. You know what? Are you familiar with that?
Right.
U.S. percentile.
You're in the top 90%.
Yeah, out of all the people that took the test, I beat 90-some%. You know, if it's 90 is the U.S. percentile, you beat 90% of the people who took the test. And I had three grades in the high 90s, 97, 98, somewhere in there. 94, I think it was. And then I had one 70-something. That was in English. And anyway, I'm trying to remember when the hell that was. That was just before I went in the Navy. I went in the Navy in October. My mother says, oh, you'll go to, she wanted to know why I was home so early. And I said, I quit school. So she says, oh, you'll go back in September. I said, no, I won't. I'm going to join the Navy in October 12th. So that's what I did.
Now, were there any casualties in your unit when you were stationed at Quonset Point?
What?
Were there any casualties in your unit when you were stationed at Quonset Point?
Not at Quonset Point, but there were.
California?
We lost a few guys, but not in our outfit. We lost guys in San Diego at Miramar. One plane blew up and killed 10 guys right off the bat, and they were in the next barracks from us. We had to go there, and the master at arms came in and emptied the lockers and, you know, whatever they do when you get killed. And we lost all those men. Then we had one guy got hit by a propeller. Engine was going, he got hit in the head, and his brains fell out onto the concrete. And he had just come back from overseas. He's been back about a month, and he got killed. And I forget, there was something else. Some other guy got killed. I forget who or how. Anyway.
Now, were you ever wounded?
Huh?
Were you ever wounded?
I lost hearing. I wear hearing aids now, but the pilots wanted somebody standing by the engine with a fire bottle in case it. That was during the Korean War, and the pilot asked me, you know, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He says, "Well, you want to stand by with the fire bottle? I said, yeah, right. So I did, and the exhaust was about here, and it backfired. Boom! Oh, big noise. And I could feel ringing in my ears for about 3 days after. Then after that, I lost hearing. And the chief petty officer is the one that noticed it. And he sent me to sick bay. And I applied for VA benefits, you know, for hearing, and they said it was not service connected. So not being service connected by their theory, I didn't get any VA benefit, but that was a lie.
So, do you have any more memorable experiences from being in the service? Like any moments that come to mind?
For what?
Do you have any specific moments that come to mind about your service?
Yeah, different things about how people react and all that stuff. But like I say, when the guy lost his brain, we were in the ordnance shack, and somebody said, "Hey, somebody just went down," you know. So we all ran out there to see what was going on, and the guy was on the ground. Then when the ambulance came, they picked him up with his feet and shoulders. They picked him up and his head fell back, and when his head fell back, his brains fell out. So we were watching that, and oh my God, you know, about ready to throw up, you know. There's different things that happen like that I can't think of them right now. Something happens, I think of it, but when it doesn't, I forget it, you know.
So what were your feelings when you were stationed in California, that 6 weeks of operational flight time?
What about it?
Yeah, how were you feeling during that time?
Well, we had,
about going overseas?
well, we didn't have to go overseas because the war ended.
But while you were training, before the war ended, how did you feel about the idea of going to battle?
That was good. Didn't have any problem with that. I'm trying to think. It was just routine, you know. Go to school, wake up, take a flight. I never fired the machine guns. I didn't have to. And it ended just before the war ended, and we had to fly our plane to Arizona and put it in a big field with about 50,000 other airplanes.
How did that feel?
Huh?
How did you feel about that?
Didn't care. I know we flew over them first, you know, and we looked down and could see planes all over, wing to wing, you know. And we landed the plane, then they took a Jeep and said, "Follow me," you know. So we followed them, and they came and pointed landing instructions, you know. So we pulled in, then they gave us a truck, and not gave us, they loaned it to us, you know, and drove us to the railroad station. And from the railroad station, we went back to San Diego, and from San Diego in another truck, we went back to the base again. Then they took us off because we had no airplane at that time. Right. But about half of our planes got sent to Arizona after the war ended.
To be turned into scrap?
To
be scrapped? Were they scrapped or mothballed?
I don't know what they did to them. Sold them to the South Americans or something. I have no idea what they did. But there was about 50,000 airplanes down there. It was a mess.
So, what were your feelings about the use of the atomic bomb in the Pacific?
What was my feeling about the atomic bomb?
What was your first reaction when you heard about it?
Good. Glad to hear it. I talked to the pilot. And he was in the Air National Guard after the war, and he was a general. He raised to become a general. And I talked to him in a bar in Boston, and I said, the scuttlebutt has it that you are a pilot. As a pilot, dropped a bomb on Nagasaki. And he says, that's right. And I said, well, what do you think about all these people who are complaining about it now? He said, I'd do it tomorrow if I had to. He said, I don't care. But the way we went then, it's not like you read about Japan today and all that stuff. It was 1 million of us, or we were expecting 1 million casualties to secure Japan. And it was either we take 1 million casualties or 250,000 of theirs, you know. And we didn't care about how many people got killed. It was just, it was part of the war, you know. They bombed Pearl Harbor, we bombed them. Same thing, you know. And nowadays they talk about the poor Japanese, and they had a tsunami or whatever they call that, an earthquake, and they're suffering, you know. We didn't feel that way then. It was us or them. You take your choice.
So, were there many men in your family who served in the Navy?
What's that?
Were there any other men in your family who served in the Navy, men or women?
My father was the chief petty officer in the Seabees. And he made 3 invasions in the Pacific. He went in early in the war. They went into Inuiatak, Saipan, and Tinian, 3 different islands they took and built up. The Seabees did the building, you know. And they fought the war at the same time. The Marines, they were with the 4th Marines. And they had to, how do you explain it? Help during the battle, and after the battle, then they did construction work for 7 or 8 months, a year, whatever it took.
So were they like combat engineers, something like that?
Construction battalions, CB. They changed it to SEABEE, yeah. But he made 3 invasions. Tinian, he came back home from Tinian just before the war ended. And I went home with him. They gave me a 25-day leave, 10 days traveling time, 15 days leave to go back home with them. And I did. Then went back to California. And that's when they assigned me to the squadron in the Fleet Air Wing 14. And if I had gone in before, I would have been overseas when the war ended in Guam. We had a base out at Guam and another base in California.
So what kind of duties would you have performed if you had been sent to Guam?
What kind of base?
What kind of duties would you have been assigned to if your plane had gone to Guam?
If my plane what?
If you had been deployed to Guam, what kind of missions would your plane
would have been flying. flying patrol missions, bombing missions, all that kind of stuff. And if I hadn't gone home with my father, I'd have been overseas at the time. I would have finished my 6 weeks of training, but it didn't do it, you know. So.
Did you anticipate the war ending that soon?
Huh?
Did you think that the war was going to go on for much longer at that point?
No, I didn't think we'd live. You're gonna live or die, one or the other, you know. And we were getting ready to invade Japan. That's what I was saying before. We expected about 1 million casualties to invade Japan. We were going to invade the southern part of Japan and then fight our way up north, you know, to Tokyo and those places. And then they needed the Marines, the Army, all that kind of stuff, you know. Air. We would have flown those missions and acted accordingly, you know.
So, were you able to stay in touch with your family while you were in the service?
Was I in touch with my family? Oh yeah, we sent letters back and forth.
Did you get letters back from your father from the Pacific?
Very rarely. Something happened, he would send me a letter, you know, when I was at home or in the Navy. He was in the overseas long before I was in the service, you know.
So were you able to use email or telegrams or just letters? Just letters back and forth?
Letters, yeah. They had special things. They used to just write in the letters and fold them up and seal them. Victory mail, they called it. And every once in a while, you'd sit down and write a letter to somebody. And the girlfriends you had in high school would send you letters and all that kind of stuff, you know. But that's about the way we corresponded back then, was with letters, you know. So, we didn't have, well, we could have had telephones, but it was complicated, you know.
I can imagine.
I mean, to make long distance calls, and you had to have the right change and put it in the machine and all that stuff, you know. But it was much more complicated.
It would have had to go on from operator to operator?
No. It was easier to write a letter and shove it in the mailbox. Just write briefly, you know. We didn't talk to the operators at all because it was too complicated to make long distance calls, because if it was like $2, you had to have 8 quarters, you know, and put 8 quarters in the machine, and then if you hung up before the $2 were hooked up, you know, you'd get it back, but then you didn't get the right amount back. Oh, it was a mess.
So, how about some other questions about life in the service? What was the food like in the Navy?
What was what?
What was the food like?
The food was good. I liked it. I like it better than I like it here. It didn't take as long. You'd go through with a tray, and then they'd have all the stuff like in a buffet. Then you'd say, give me some of that, and they'd throw that in, and they'd just take what you want and keep going, you know. You know, over here they have a menu that you can't understand. They use words you don't know what they are, and they have a routine that is slow. So I liked it better in the service than I did here.
Did you get 3 meals a day in the Navy?
Huh?
Did you get 3 meals a day in the Navy?
Oh yeah.
And did you feel like you had plenty of supplies?
Oh yeah.
Did you have enough clothing, enough equipment?
Yeah. No problem.
Was there any special clothing you were issued as part of the Naval Air Crew?
Yeah, we were supposed to have a leather jacket for pilots and crewmen, and went down to supply and said, we just got assigned to aircraft, let's have the leather jackets. And the guy says, oh, we don't have any. I said, that's not right, you know. Anyway, a few months later, we were told we were going to load all these boxes and stuff onto a ship. Not a big ship, a small ship, and go out to sea. And we went out there and then opened up the boxes full of leather jackets. And we had to rip the backs open and then throw them in the ocean, you know, and get rid of them because they were afraid that too many leather jackets in the stores would bring the prices down and all that kind of stuff, you know. We didn't like it. It was a mess.
Any other air crew equipment that you would have gotten?
I'm trying to remember.
Were you issued parachutes?
No, the parachutes were in the planes.
Okay.
And in fact, we flew one time, I forget, during the Korean War, we flew down to Maryland somewhere, and we found out that we were one parachute short. And we went and asked them to give us a parachute, and we'd send it back to them. And they wouldn't do it. So, the hell with you. So we went back to, anyway, went back there with one less parachute than we had people, and we made plans. If we have to go out, 2 of us will join together and drive with the parachute, you know, and see what happens.
Whoever drew the short straw?
Huh?
Whoever drew the short straw?
Short strap?
Short straw, like drawing straws.
I don't know what you're saying.
The expression, you know, just whoever draws the shortest straw. I guess it's, you know, the unluckiest one, you know, has to hold the parachute.
Monthliest one?
Oh, the unluckiest.
I don't know what you're saying.
But did you have radios in the planes?
Yeah, but we had a radio man, and he stayed by the radio, and the pilot would tell him what to say, and then he'd say it. And we didn't operate with the radios. I mean, the crewmen didn't operate with the radios. It was just the radio man. That was his job, to speak on the radio when he had a chance to.
And then he would tell the rest of the crew?
Yeah.
What he heard over the radio?
Yeah.
And did you feel any pressure or stress during the service?
No.
Like, do you feel
just that they used to do some dumb things once in a while.
Like what? Do you have any stories?
Dumb things.
Any stories? Any examples?
Well, we've been talking about some of the stuff they did, but
the parachute story, that's a good example.
Things like that, you know. Jackets, parachutes, it's a mess.
Do you feel like you suffer from post-traumatic stress?
No. I stayed in the service after the war. for a couple of years, and then I got out, went back to inactive duty, and I had signed 4 years of reserve time, and they called me back in for the Korean War. And I shouldn't have signed that 4-year paper, but I did. And wound up doing nothing for the Korean War.
Were you relieved that you weren't sent to Korea?
Yeah, we expected to go there. We didn't. They sent us to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and we thought they would send us to Korea, but they didn't. They just assigned us to this NAT-2, N-A-T-U, Naval Aircraft Torpedo Unit. It was an experimental outfit. We'd drop torpedoes and see how they work, and stuff like that. We had all kinds of aircraft. We had AD-4s and helicopters and all kinds of things that we'd fly around. And
is that the Sky Raider, the AD-4?
AD-4, yeah, I forget what they called it.
Or was that a Skyhawk?
I don't remember.
So, would you ever fly with the aircraft as aircrew? Made the torpedo drops?
When what?
When the aircraft made the torpedo drops, would you ever fly with them as aircrew?
That's what we did. Mm-hmm. We'd fly and we had the little hand thing, and the pilot would kick us or something, and then we'd screw the trigger, drop the torpedo. It was 2,127 pounds. And we dropped one, loading it into a, what do you call it, a bomb bay. And don't mind me, I'm losing my memory.
You're doing great.
Anyway, we dropped one. We tried to hook it up, and it slipped and fell. Boom, hit the ground. And it didn't blow up, you know. And then they came out and investigated, and we lost that plane. Or not the plane, but the torpedo. It was squashed, you know. And when they hit the concrete tarmac, it bent. So they wanted to get rid of it. We had torpedoes we hadn't even used yet. So we didn't mind losing one, yeah.
So, would they drop torpedoes from helicopters?
From what?
From helicopters?
Yeah. We had blimps. I flew in blimps and helicopters and all kinds of airplanes and British bombers and so forth.
Did you ever fly in a jet aircraft?
No. Well, except in the airlines. But I didn't fly in it. I became a pilot after the war, a civilian pilot.
You got your pilot's license?
Hmm?
You got a pilot's license?
Yeah.
What type of aircraft did you fly?
Cessna 140s, 182, single engine land plane. Fly any single engine land plane.
So when you were in the service, did you do anything special for good luck? Like, did you have a good luck charm or anything you do?
Not that I can think of.
And how did you guys entertain yourselves?
How did I what?
Entertain yourself. Like,
just go have a beer once in a while and go to the bar. We had cruise clubs right on the bases, and we could go to the cruise club or go to town, or on a weekend we'd go up to LA or Riverside or one of those places, and then come back to San Diego.
Did you ever see any USO shows, or was there any Navy entertainment that came through?
Not during the war. That came out after the war.
So what did you usually do when you were on leave?
On leave?
The same kind of thing?
Just go have a beer or something. Well, it depends. If we were on leave, there's liberty and then there's leave. And leave meant a long time. 7, 8, 10 days, 15 days, you know. And liberty could be just a weekend or at night, you know. And wherever we were stationed, we'd take liberty at night. Most of the training bases don't have it during the week. They just have it at night or on the weekends. And if it was too late, if we got out of school at 7 o'clock, no liberty. It was too late, you know. And then you'd wait till Saturday, and you'd go out Saturday, come back Sunday. That's what we did. But usually you go in and have a few beers, and they didn't worry about ID cards. And if you were old enough to wear a uniform, you were old enough to drink beer. In Oklahoma, they had what they call 3.2. That's the beer with 3-point alcohol. But I think they used to just keep a few 3.2s on the side, and they'd feed us with 6 or 7, because we could get just as drunk on 3.2 as we could on a 6.7.
So, do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
What?
Do you have anything particularly humorous or funny? Any kind of funny stories, funny events that happened while you were in the service?
I gotta go through years. I can't think of anything right offhand.
Do you remember any pranks?
Hmm?
Do you remember any pranks or practical jokes that people would pull on each other?
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff. That's just so much of that it was every day, you know.
Do you recall anything specific?
I can't think of anything right now, but I need something to remind me.
So, what did you think of your officers or fellow soldiers while you were in the service?
The officers were kind of, in the Navy, they didn't want to associate much with the enlisted pigs, you know. So all the enlisted pigs stayed together, but the Navy, particularly pilots and all that, they were different. But regular Navy officers that weren't part of the air crew, the pilots would let their hair down and go fly, you know, do missions. But the Navy was so segregated that the officers and the enlisted pigs, and that's what they called them. Anyway, they would separate, you know. If you just said the wrong word, they'd court-martial you, you know. It was just, I didn't care too much for the naval officers.
So how about your chiefs, your CPOs? How did they treat you?
All right. Most of them were good. And once in a while you run into a bad one, but not bad. Not often.
So who would you spend more time with? usually on a day-to-day basis? Your officers or your chief?
Other enlisted men. You spent all day and all night with them. The officers were just...
So what did you think of the fellow enlisted men when you were in the service?
Huh?
What did you think of your fellow enlisted men when you were in the service?
Fine.
Now, do you recall the day that your service ended?
Do I what?
Your last day of service? For the first time. What was your last day of service like in World War II?
The last day of service?
Mm.
It was about 2 years after the war ended. I stayed in, they had a point system then, and I was so young that I didn't have many points. And just operated. I can't explain it, but you don't have much to do with what's going on around you. You just do it, you know. What was your question again?
Oh, do you recall the day that your service ended? Your last.
Oh, the last day of service? No big deal.
Where were you?
In World War II, I was in California. And, no, wait a minute. I was in Squantum, Massachusetts, near Boston. And that was it. I got papers and signed the papers and go to the receiving station in Boston and they let you out. No big deal.
Now, how about during the Korean War? What was your last day of service like then?
About the same. You just fill out some papers. They tell you, you know, you got to go tomorrow so come in and sign some papers. So you go in and sign some papers and go to the place, receiving station, and they discharge you. It takes 7 or 8 days. That's about it.
So what did you do in the days and weeks after your discharge?
What did I do?
Like
I went to work for my father.
Okay.
He was in the construction business.
That makes sense. Naval Construction Battalion.
I went to work for him, and after 6 or 8 weeks, I decided I didn't like this. I said, I don't like this. He said, you want to come in there?
Oh, that's just the boss.
Huh?
That's just the boss. I wanted to know if we were still interviewing.
Yeah.
But, so after you left your father's business, where did you go?
Went out to Chicago. I was supposed to be going to Denver Naval Air Station, and I had a car then. I had bought my father's car and went out to Denver. Well, on the way out to Denver, we were in Chicago running out of money. So they had a base up there, Glenview, Naval Air Station. I went to Glenview when they signed us up there, so we didn't go out to Denver. Later on, I went to Denver as a
in the Air National Guard.
Yeah, Air National Guard man on active duty.
So did you work or did you go back to school at all after your service? I know you got your pilot's license.
Always in and out of schools all the time. If anything came up, I'd go to school. I was a professor at the University of Connecticut, and I had never even graduated from high school. And they hired me as a professor, changed the title to, what was it? Realty specialist or radar specialist or something like that. It was about radar. I got into radar, and I was trying to get all the towns to, no, computers. I was trying to get all the towns to use computers, so they put me in this unit at the University of Connecticut, and we had offices in Hartford, and we'd go to a Hartford office and do that, what we had to do, you know. I was in there for about 2 years.
Was any of your education supported by the GI Bill? Did the government help to pay for any of your schools?
Just the flying lessons. I got my pilot's license on a GI Bill.
And did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Did I make any what?
Close friendships? Do you still talk to anybody in the service?
I went, a guy named Johnny something, I forget what it was. He lived in East St. Louis. And when I was at Glenview, Illinois, near Chicago, I took a weekend and went down to East St. Louis and met him. We were good friends during the war.
So, did you ever join a veterans organization, like the American Legion? Or
yes, and it was useless. I tried to get them to get me VA benefits for some shit, yeah. Sick. Anyway, they didn't do it. I got out of there.
Now, you said you had several careers after the war. You know, professor. You were in real estate as well, right?
Yeah.
And did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
No, 'cause when we had the Vietnam War, I was opposed to it. I thought that was a waste of time and money, you know. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, your years in the service. How do you look at emerging conflicts, modern war, with your own experience in mind?
I don't think we should have done it. I think it was a waste of time and money.
So, has your naval service or Air National Guard service, do you feel like it's affected your life?
Hmm?
Do you feel like it's affected your life?
It affected my life?
Mm.
Not really. Just while I was in there, I was in Denver. Then I came back and we'd just meet on weekends, one or two weekends a month, and fly and do what we had to do.
So were you able to fly when you were with the Air National Guard?
I didn't fly in the government planes. I flew in my own plane.
Right.
Private planes.
And is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
Anything what?
Anything more you'd like to add? Any stories that you may have recalled? No, we were talking about funny stories before, practical jokes.
I could think of 100 of them, but I can't think right now.
So.
Oh yeah.
Oh, here we go.
They were in the, at night, late at night, they were in the guardhouse at the gate.
Okay.
And the guy had a gun, and he, you know, they were issued a gun, you know. He had the gun, he pointing it at the guy's head, and he says, if I had a bullet, this thing would go off, you know. And shot, and it hit the guy's ear, right here, and screwed them all up. And they wondered what the hell happened. I fired a .50 caliber machine gun out of a wing one time when I was,
accident?
huh?
By accident?
Yeah. And the pilot
While you were on the ground or while you were in the air?
on the ground.
Oh.
And the pilot called me. He says, "Hey, I tried this gun. It wouldn't work." I said, "Well, you probably didn't turn the switch on." I turned the switch on and squeezed the trigger, and bang! 50 caliber machine gun just fired one shot. We took what they call, what do they call it? I forget what they called it. Anyway, the bore sight, you put it in the bore of the plane, and you look in the spyglass, and it tells you where the hell the bore is pointing.
Right.
And I fired that thing. I forget where I was at the time. We were just doing routine work, you know. And is that a dog barking?
I believe it is.
Huh?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
But, so you fired the gun and then what?
Anyway, we bore sighted and it went right over the top of the hangar. If we had been in the first row, it would have gone through the second floor offices where all the officers hang out. But it went up over the top. I don't know where it went. We looked at the map and tried to figure out where the hell it would land.
What kind of range did those machine guns have?
Huh?
What kind of range did those machine guns have? Like
What kind of range? I forget. I knew it then, but I can't remember it now. It had quite a range, 4 or 5 miles, something like that.
Wow.
You know, it aimed, and anyway, we fired it and nothing happened. They came out and investigate. They sent an officer out. And what happened? You tell them. He said, "Oh, okay." You know, not much you can say about it.
Any more stories come to mind?
Any more stories? I could think of hundreds, but I can't think of them right now.
Well, Mr. Vincent, I just want to thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
And for agreeing to...
For what?
And for agreeing to do this interview today.
I can't hear you.
Oh, and for agreeing to be part of this interview today.
Oh, all right.
I really do appreciate it.
You're at Central Connecticut?
Yes.
All right.